Hi there, and welcome to an emergency podcast of I've totally fucked it up. Sorry, let me start again. Oh. Right, 3, 2, 1. Hi there, and welcome to an emergency podcast of the overeducated, underloved millennials. Liz Truss has resigned. She's actually resigned. So I'm joined here by my lovely co-host Adam to help me unpack everything that's going on. Adam, how has the last 20 hours been treating you?
Obviously it's been fascinating, but I'm slightly depressed because our episode of less than 48 hours ago has now effectively become defunct. If you come across that episode now, just skip the last sort of half an hour where we talk about Trump, because that's really all there is to it, isn't it?
Let's be honest, it had become defunct like 2 hours after we released it.
Yeah, so should we? I guess is that a good place to start? The sort of
I guess
24 hours, the last sort of 24 hours. So, well, clearly, so the first big thing was, so sort of middle of the day, you suddenly hear that Suella Braverman, was it in the early afternoon? Suella Braverman, suddenly seemingly out of nowhere, she resigned, and obviously, given the complete chaos which we've discussed in previous episodes, this was just another sort of nail in Liz Truss's coffin, and there was a bit of confusion because at first everyone sort of thought, oh, is this Suella Braverman sort of hitting back because of the appointment of Jeremy Hunt, and then it sort of became quite clear very quickly that this was the official story was that this was because Suella Braverman had broken security rules, which meant that she had to stand down as Home Secretary. Which then so my first thought was then, okay, maybe this isn't actually as big a deal as you'd think. But then, of course, she then released her resignation letter, which obviously it started off by saying, I made this mistake, I have to resign. But it also then included a massive dig at Liz Truss and at the government, saying that they'd broken multiple promises on topics such as immigration. So it suggests to me that while this might be technically the reason why she resigned, I suspect she wasn't exactly, pushed.
Sorry, I'm not ignoring
she wanted to go.
I have Twitter and updates on my phone, so I just wanted to say to everybody, because you're like talking, and what you're saying, it's just my phone going crazy. So I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
Carry on.
That's fine. Yeah. So Suella Braverman, from what I see in my interpretation, is very much, I get the impression she wanted to resign, and this seemed like a very sort of pretty good excuse to resign. I don't know what your thoughts were on it, Katie.
Well, when she first did it, I was a bit like, when they first said, oh, she sent like secure information on a personal email, I think it was. We live in a world with Trump like literally holding documents that are classified, and let's be honest, nothing surprises us about this government anymore. So I was thinking, oh my God, what has she done? What has she said? What has she sent? And then, like you said, it quickly became very obvious. There were rumours going around of a roaring argument in Downing Street before she had resigned. People saying that they'd been screaming and shouting. So there was
90 minutes.
Yeah, there was a lot going around that like this wasn't just a resignation just because she had done that. And then to read the letter where she's basically, like you said, she basically said, we have made mistakes and people aren't taking responsibility for the mistakes. We're not delivering the agenda we said we were going to deliver. It was, wow. But I'll be honest, I didn't actually think that it would be a death toll for Liz Truss at that moment in time. Suella Braverman's a very controversial character in the UK government. So I thought, oh, well, can't really see anybody kind of kicking off about it. I could see people calling them out for who Liz Truss chose to replace Suella Braverman. Grant Shapps, who can't even make the trains run, let alone run on time. So that's,
As I said to you yesterday, the one positive of that will be almost certainly that if Grant Shapps tries to organise flights to Rwanda for refugees, they'll almost certainly end up in Glasgow or Birmingham. So that's probably the one positive of Grant Shapps getting that role.
What?
Yeah, I guess that was that felt very much like Jeremy Hunt that felt like a Jeremy Hunt appointment. I can't imagine Liz Truss would have picked someone who was literally slagging her off a week ago, publicly, sort of, saying she wasn't fit for the role, saying that her policies didn't make any sense. So, to me, it was such a bizarre appointment. It felt like it was just that felt like a Jeremy Hunt appointment. I don't know what you think.
I agree. I think it was a sort of trying to pull the party back again, like we said, going for this safe pair of hands, trying to say, look, I can bridge both now, and I need to try and bridge this gap, which, was the narrative for a short period until the vote on fracking. We're both drinking wine right now, guys, because it's been a day. Would you like to tell them about the vote on fracking?
Oh, I'm sure it was. This was. I think this is the. I think, in all seriousness, this whole situation and the sort of the soap opera saga really since 2016 just makes me so angry in terms of the reputation of this country, which is now non-existent. This felt like almost like the end, like it felt like this was due because of all the insanity that's happened.
It's like
so last night.
Sorry.
So last night.
Really badly.
So that's okay. So yesterday it was what's called opposition day. So the opposition are allowed to put forward motions, which, to be honest, most of the time don't get much attention because they're not legally binding anyway. But what happened was the Labour Party, then, for being the leading party, put forward a motion to ban fracking. And again, at first, this probably shouldn't be seen as that big of a deal because it's not binding, and people don't really usually probably get a mention on page 4 of the Guardian or something, but that's probably about it. But Liz Truss, and I'm assuming the chief whip, to make it what's called a free line whip issue, which effectively means it becomes a vote of confidence in the government. That means you have to, if you are a member of the governing party, you have to vote for it, or you are, you're removed. You're removed from the party. It's that simple. And this, of course, turned it into a huge issue, right? Because this became a vote on Truss's premiership, effectively, it felt like. And then so we get towards the vote. We get towards the vote sort of around 7 o'clock. And suddenly we hear this discussion that it might not actually be. The chief whips basically come out and say, actually, this isn't a free line whip. This might, we're going to turn it into a free vote. And apparently this unleashed complete and utter sort of chaos within the lobbies, within the chamber, because Tory MPs suddenly didn't know, whether or not they were allowed to vote against this or not.
So you were watching it. I was watching it live. And what a time. And essentially, Ed Miliband was making very, very valid points. There was a lot of backward and forward over the chamber. And then you could hear the lobbies outside. You could hear that there was a commotion. And there were various efforts by the Labour Party and by the SNP, the Liberals, even the Tories themselves, to clarify what the Tories were actually voting on. So is it a confidence vote? Is it not a confidence vote? What are they voting on here? Because obviously with Ed Miliband's proposal, it was basically about fracking. The Labour Party had no intention of making this a vote about the government. It was solely to stop the Conservatives from fracking in the United Kingdom. That was literally it. And the Conservatives had blown it up to be more, as you said. So as this debate is going on, it like switches. So they're being told in the lobby that it's a confidence vote, it's a confidence vote, you must vote this way, otherwise you will have the whip removed. There's screaming, there's shouting, there's allegations of bullying, there's allegations of people being physically dragged into certain rooms to vote with the government. All of this is going on whilst the House is still in session, it's still debating. And then the minister, the Tory minister, when asked by a Tory MP, is this a no confidence? Oh no, of course it's not a confidence vote. After all of these MPs had been whipped and bullied and dragged into places, and then about 5 minutes later, they came back to read the result, which obviously the government had succeeded. But in all of this, one thing that's really, really telling, which I then thought it's over, is not only the allegations of bullying and physically dragging members of parliament into lobby, which is so against House rules. The second thing was the Prime Minister herself didn't even vote because she was chasing the Chief Whip around the Houses of Parliament to try and get her to not resign.
There's been some confusion about this. So I've heard some ministers in Liz Truss, the official line I think seems to be that they did vote, but their voting card didn't work. That seems to be one of the claims, and I don't know if that's true or not because I wasn't there. But I think we need to. I think these accusations of bullying and quite literally what seems to be physical of members of parliament, that to me is just unforgivable. And obviously, I've seen lots of people making jokes about it on Twitter, and I can understand, it seems a bit silly and pantomimish, but I think there is a genuine, serious point here. Any other workplace, that would be workplace harassment and bullying, and it shouldn't be accepted. And I think this, to me, just summarizes how depressing it is at the moment to be, if you're about a British democracy, that things like this are now honestly not a surprise. I mean, I was shocked, but I wasn't terribly shocked or massively shocked.
No, and
these, it's important to note these are accusations which have come not just from multiple MPs, from Labour MPs, from I've seen SNP MPs sort of saying what they saw as well. So this is something which has been, witnessed by multiple members of Parliament, and it makes me frankly very sad that we're in that it came to this is the situation we were in as a country.
As well as a country, and also the Conservative Party, to lower yourselves to that level where your deputy prime minister is dragging people into a room, which just shows complete disregard for the people of this country. And also as well, my point initially on this, as I tweeted the other day, was the fact that they made this bill, the confidence vote, also is insulting to the people of this country, because they would rather make it about them and their party's internal warfare than actually the welfare of this nation, because most people in the United Kingdom oppose fracking, quite rightly, and they made their MPs vote to not ban it, to try and show some stupid performance of silly solidarity to a leader that was already dead. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. I think we very quickly saw after this fiasco what MPs were saying, both to the BBC and just on Twitter, online. You got the impression that it felt like it was done. I mean, it felt there were some really strong words from some Conservative MPs, and it just felt like it was done. And of course, then moving on to today. This morning, it was kind of a case of I woke up this morning thinking it's about 50-50 chance. Maybe she'll go today, 50-50, and then. I believe at sort of late in the morning, there was suddenly talk, and I think around 12 o'clock, Sir Graham Brady, who is the leader of the 1922 committee, which is the influential group of backbench MPs who effectively run the Conservative Party. They make sure that the rules of the Conservative Party are kept in check and that the Conservative Party backbenchers support the Prime Minister effectively. So they effectively sort of run the show, as it were, run the party machinery. Graham Brady went to Downing Street, number 10 Downing Street, around 12 o'clock. Then I believe both Therese Coffey and the chair of the party, Jake Berry, then went in sort of within that hour-long period. And then by sort of 1 o'clock, it was clear it was announced there was going to be an announcement at 1:30. And I think by that point, well, she wasn't really going to say anything else, was she? I think Sky was sort of...
The lectern was put out, we knew.
Yeah, the now iconic lectern, which has probably made more appearances in the last year than it did in the sort of 10 years previous. But I mean, it's just... yeah. So by about 1:25, I was watching it on Sky News, and they were saying, "Yeah, we've heard that she's going to resign." So then she comes out a couple of minutes late, as is usually the case with these things. Around, I think, and she gave a very, very short statement where she effectively said, I'm paraphrasing, she basically said, "I was elected at a very difficult period. I clearly do not have the support of the Parliamentary Conservative Party, and therefore I have to resign." And then she said there'd be a very quick process of about a week to replace me, and I'll remain Prime Minister until then. And then she was gone. That was it. I mean, to be fair, she's only been in for 44 days, so there wasn't really much else she could say. But
Doesn't
yeah,
really
that was
done
it.
it
She was
now, does he really?
that was it. I mean, that was it. So yeah, so just start with Katie. What were your thoughts on her sort of resignation and how it all went down?
I think that you could tell when Graham Brady went in through the back door. That was a big thing. Making him go in through the tradesman's entrance, as we call it in the UK, that was not a good sign to not use the front door. I think that Number 10 tried to quell the fears a little bit by saying that Liz Truss herself had called Graham Brady in. But I think by that point, as you said, the night before in, the Commons lobby, there were a lot of strong words said. Particularly, I can't remember that MP's name, where he said that he'd been an MP for 17 years and he'd never seen anything like it.
I can't remember the name of the guy, but
it was such an impassioned speech that as a Labourite, I genuinely felt some solidarity with that guy at that moment in time, because he was absolutely livid. But he was also, you could tell on his face, he was so let down. And I think that was the kind of general consensus at that point, that it had got so bad that it was just pitiful. And so this morning when
it was Charles Walker.
Charles Walker.
Sorry, fantastic. That's why I wasn't being rude. I was listening.
No, he was great. So then when Graham Brady went in through the tradesman's entrance, that was a sign for me. But for me, her speech, the thing that I couldn't get over, she kept smirking. Did you notice that? She kept smiling and smirking, and I was thinking, why are you smirking right now? Surely you've said that since you were a little girl you wanted to be Prime Minister, and you've basically been told after 45 days that you're everything that's wrong with our country and that you need to leave, and you're stood there I went to the King, oh great. It really, to me, Adam, I felt like her speech embodied everything that was wrong with her tenure, her very short tenure as Prime Minister, because she was still, even in those few minutes that she was outside, so removed from the general consensus of the country. And there was not an ounce of I'm sorry that I've made our country an absolute laughingstock. Talking about Twitter, I have international friends that are on my Twitter that are just living it up, that work in politics, that are just living it up at our expense right now. And when she was smirking, I was like, do you understand the gravity of what you have done right now?
I think the way I would describe it was shameless. I think which I think sums her up quite well as a politician. I think if you compare it to Theresa May, and obviously I had lots of problems with Theresa May.
Theresa May cried.
But you genuinely felt this was someone who had tried their best, regardless of their faults in our view. You felt that this was someone who tried them and genuinely felt like they'd let the country down, let themselves. They felt like they'd had failed. Whereas with Liz Truss, you almost got this sort of almost lack of sort of awareness of what has actually happened. She didn't seem to get the situation. It was weird, and I just the impression there was this lack of empathy, lack of awareness, which it was strange. But
I just felt that there was just no sort of awareness, and that was one of the main criticisms that Labour, the Liberal Democrats, that she was just vacuous. In her entire time that she was there, she was just completely vacuous. And I felt like, you know what? That speech has really summed up your tenure. It really has, because even now that the proverbial has hit the fan, you still have no clue.
Yeah. I think, I agree with that. I think it's important to look around before we talk about who's next and what might happen in the next few days. I think it's important to look at a few things around this resignation. So firstly, she was in post for 44 days, which makes her the shortest serving Prime Minister ever.
But it is pathetic.
the person before that was a prime minister from not the Conservative Party, the Tory Party from 1827. He was a man named George Canning. And do you know why he left office?
Because he died.
He died of tuberculosis. So Liz Truss couldn't last longer than a man who was dying of tuberculosis in the 1800s while in the top, as prime minister. I think we shouldn't forget just how fundamentally huge this is. This is a fundamental failure. I mean, if you can't last more than a few months, particularly when the Conservative rules are actually written in a way which gives you a year, it gives you a year sort of where you're not meant to be able to be touched. It shows just a fundamental failure, sort of regardless of policy, regardless of anything. If you only last 44 days as a prime minister, you are a failure, and that's harsh reality.
I know I keep laughing, but it's not it's really hard to explain. I think it's like a generational trauma thing now that we use humor as a defense mechanism. But I can't stop laughing because if I stop laughing, I think of how absolutely awful this whole situation is. Not only have we had a prime minister that lasted only 44 days, let's not even say that 10 days of that she couldn't do anything because the Queen had died. So literally a month. She has been in the job a month, really. So not only do we have that, and like you said, it's a monumental failure and a total embarrassment, but we also
not just of her, of the Conservative Party as well. We should always emphasise that.
Absolutely, 100%, because they picked her, they put her in there, so nobody else did. But it's this whole notion as well that this level of failure has a threat on a level that actually threatens the validity and how we actually do politics in this country. So that's why I keep laughing, because if you actually think of the gravity that this has, if this wipes out the Conservative Party, which I'm not going to say is a terrible thing, but it could be, but I don't know, because it would completely change the political landscape of this country forever. And
yeah, absolutely.
I
think it should all point out. So just to give you a contrast, I always like to compare us to Canada, because Canada effectively, not completely, but has a very similar system to we do. So it's a very good comparison to make. So I voted in my first general election in 2015. That's my first time I could vote in a general election. And I have a Canadian friend who, I don't know how well you know Canadian politics, but in 2015, they also had a general election. And in 2015, in Canada, Justin Trudeau, who was still the Prime Minister of Canada, was first elected. That was when he first became Prime Minister. In the same year, for those who don't remember, David Cameron won his first majority in 2015. He'd already been in government in coalition before that, but he won his first majority in 2015. This will be Justin Trudeau. Whoever comes in and replaces Liz Truss will be Justin Trudeau's fifth Prime Minister. This will be our fifth Prime Minister in 6 years. So David Cameron left office in 2016. So between 2016 and 2022, in a 6-year period, we have had 5 different prime ministers. That is just, and I mean, obviously it goes without saying, why is that? And I'm sorry, but fundamentally it comes back down to Brexit. I mean, if you want to look at where this started, it has to be Brexit, right? I don't know what you...
I agree. I was actually talking to my friend about this today, and we actually said the fundamental problem with the Conservative Party, and the thing that has actually brought the Conservative Party down, which none of them realised, is Brexit. Brexit has brought the Conservative Party down because the Conservative Party made themselves the Brexit Party. That's what they made themselves. And now they're in a period where Brexit has happened, right? We're facing all of the consequences of Brexit, but because the Conservatives coalesced around this one thing, they have no other policy. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. They don't know what they believe in.
The thing that sums this up perfectly on Politics Live at 12:15 today's episode of Politics Live with BBC Two, the Conservative representatives, because they always have to have a Labour representative and a Conservative representative. They always try and get one of each. The Conservative representative was Tobias Ellwood, who, for those who don't know, is a more sort of seen as a more centrist, more pro-European member of the party. And he was asked this question about the economy. He was asked about Brexit. And he actually, before saying what he said, he said, I'm a bit scared to say this because as a party, this is such a toxic issue, and we are so paralysed by this. He genuinely said, I am scared to talk about it. And before then saying that he felt, rightly in my opinion, we should rejoin the single market and use the Norway model, which I'm sure upset quite a few Tory MPs quite significantly. But the point is the fact that he was genuinely had to sort of start with a precursor where he said, I probably, because we're in such a toxic state because of this issue, just shows me how fundamentally Brexit has changed the Conservative Party. And also, I think finally the next stages and who might replace this Truss. I think David Cameron, God, I don't know where he is right now, but he must be looking and thinking, what the hell did I do? What on earth did I do to the country? Well, first of all, yeah, to his party and to his country, because I know this will probably sound quite unpopular given that we are now a Brexit nation, but that decision to hold an EU referendum, not only it is the fundamental reason why we were in this chaos. And for me, it's just frankly unforgivable, if I'm being honest.
It stabilised our entire country, it threatened our democracy, and it made it basically chose to blow up a division in the Conservative Party that was not shared throughout the entire nation. Let's be honest, Brexit was an issue that was nowhere on anybody's radar when they voted in the 2010.
Remember when he said in 2014, his argument in 2014 was this will reunify the Conservative Party. This will end all infighting in the Conservative Party.
But they've done this now because
God.
they were against us constantly. They literally made themselves the Brexit Party. They did what they were saying to the Liberal Democrats. Oh, you're going to make yourselves the anti-Brexit Party. They made themselves the Brexit Party. And now there's nothing else that they can coalesce around that will enable them to form any sort of path forward for this nation. And it's exactly what we said the other day, which is why the podcast, let's be honest, is still a bit relevant, because we said the Conservatives have no grasp on the national narrative at the moment. And I will put my hand on heart and say this now, whoever they elect as leader will have to follow a path of austerity. They will have to, because it will be the only thing that they can use to unite the party. It's the only thing that the Conservatives will agree on. And when you're going to go into a general election against Keir Starmer, who is preaching hope and is preaching national spending and higher taxes for rich people, you ain't got a blinking chance, mate.
I would push back a bit. I think if the next person comes in and does commit austerity, puts us on a path to austerity, which is very likely, there'll be Northern Tory MPs, and that's sort of the red wall, the sort of the new Tory MPs, 2019. They will start to cause. So that's what I'm saying.
They've given up on them already, Adam, because they made fracking. So they've given up on them already.
Yeah, I just, to be honest, I apologise for ranting a bit earlier, but that just, I think this whole thing is just.
I've been ranting the whole session.
This whole thing is just such a mess, and it makes me so upset because I think Britain has obviously got issues in its history, of course it does. But when I was growing up, I always believed that British democracy was a gold standard form of democracy. I looked at it and I thought, it's not perfect. We make mistakes. Which country doesn't? But we have got we've got a very strong parliament. We've got a very respectable form of democracy, which has been copied by other countries around the world, including Canada, which is always the example I like to compare to. And it felt like it was in a good place, but really, I think. Fundamentally, it feels like Brexit, and since then it has just been broken, and it makes me very sad.
I agree. I think that the last moment, and this sounds really, really sad, the last time that I was actually proud of the country that I come from was the 2012 Olympics. After then, it's just been one big downhill trudge. It's just been one big downhill trudge. There have been little moments where I've thought.
When was the first for me? I think it'd be the first same-sex wedding, and I can't remember if that was 2013 or 2014. I think that was the last time.
Yeah.
For me, I think.
It's been one big downhill trudge since then, and I think that what this whole fiasco tells you is that the British public actually feel the same.
Well, and that's been shown today, for anyone who hasn't seen the latest Redfield poll. Bizarrely, actually had Labour technically down 1 point, but I think the Tories were down 2 points. But effectively, Labour was on 55, the Tories were on 19. which actually, when you put it into the electoral calculus, which I know has problems, but is, I like to think is relatively accurate, would put the Tories down to a single seat. So it just shows you how dire the situation is for them, and very clearly, I think it very clearly shows why they've acted so quickly, right? Because clearly this is something which local constituents, and they will be hearing this from their constituents. They will be hearing what is being reflected in polling from their constituents, which is why I think they've acted so desperately.
And I'm just speechless, because you know how you said that you're sorry for ranting. I just don't think that I can communicate how disappointed I am. Like you said, we are both people that committed our studies and our time and our lives to British politics. That's what we believe in. We like to help people. We want to construct policy. We want to do good. We want to see Britain do well, right? And to see such blatant disregard for that, not only our system of democracy, but more importantly, the people of this country, is just, it's sickening. And to bring it on to the next stage of the discussion, who will come next, I'm going to put it out there. Boris Johnson is currently leading in MP nominations, and I can tell you something. If he comes back, that is the biggest slap in the face.
Should we talk about the process? So as I said, the 1922 committee effectively runs how the Conservative Party works. So effectively, bizarrely, compared to sort of like the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats who have this stuff written in the Constitution, effectively every time it comes around to a new leader, which has happened a lot recently, as I'm sure we've made quite clear, what happens is the 1922 committee effectively there and then has to say, okay, these are the rules for this particular contest.
Which is so
effectively Graham Brady, which it is bizarre, isn't it? Because effectively it means the last sort of, what was it, Boris Johnson, Theresa May, last 4 prime ministers have effectively been chosen in the process, which Sir Graham Brady and his friends basically just came up with on the spot kind of thing, right? Which is just so bizarre.
I don't know if you've ever seen the Labour Party constitution. It's like it's massive.
Yeah, I think the Lib Dem one is similar. It's just
because it like,
I get the impression they just put the Liberal and SDP ones into one thing, and it just now is this
just
huge.
mashed it together. But it's like to then have just this random guy and his mates pick this policy to a Labour member.
Just to choose. It's correct. So the process for this particular occasion is that by Monday, you have, for an MP to be on the ballot paper, they have to have received the nomination from 100 Conservative MPs, and just to be clear, that is an extremely high number. There's 365. I think there is Conservative MPs. So effectively, this has been done because they don't want a long list of candidates. They want to really whittle down the candidates quickly as they can. So I suspect what that means is, I'm pretty confident that means there'll only be 2 candidates, possibly 3. There could be there's an outside chance of 3 because obviously there can't be 4 because there's not 400 MPs, just a bit of basic maths there. So it's going to be either 2 or 3. Though obviously there is an outside chance it could be 1. And of course, this is the important thing to note, right? So if on Monday only 1 candidate has over 100 and nobody else does, then they would become Prime Minister. But in the event that there's more than 1, so if there's 3, there will be a vote within the Conservative MPs will vote, and it will be whittled down to 2. And if it's just 2, or if it's been whittled down to 2, then bizarrely the Conservative MPs will vote again so that they know who the most popular candidate is. That won't actually decide who the Prime Minister is, but it will just see a way to sort of say, okay, we've got these 2, and this is the one that's more popular with the MPs. And then that will be put forward to a vote online by Conservative members, these 2 candidates. But the thing, so first of all, that's of course the vital point, right? So Conservative members put us in this mess. They picked Boris, they picked Liz Truss, and they also picked David Cameron for that matter. Don't forget.
I'm not unscorned. I'm a Labour member. I know what it was like to vote for the wrong person. So I'm not going to say that I don't know how it feels. But for goodness sake, the second time round, I voted for the right person. So can you please just do it?
So but the thing that also annoys me about this is that there's a massive hypocrisy in this. So we get told by the Conservatives that in general elections, local elections, not only are you not allowed to do online voting, they've always said that's potentially at risk of being hacked and shouldn't be done. you're also, you don't have to they're trying to get through this ID thing as well, which is, again, there's no evidence of enough voter fraud for that to be justified. So they're saying that you have to do that for, parliamentary and local elections, but to elect the next prime minister of this country, they are happy to effectively do a slightly more secure version of a Twitter poll, where effectively they're going to send emails to their member. And that to me just seems so hypocritical, extremely hypocritical. And it just, again, it shows the hypocrisy and madness of the whole process.
Let's just add it to the long list. Why we're in this mess? Like, it's like we're picking the next prime minister, but it's like, tell me who your favourite Spice Girl is, BuzzFeed poll. Like, and you're like, what are you? Which is Jerry Halliwell, but that's beside the point. But it's like,
so so a few candidates have already ruled themselves out. Jeremy Hunt has said he's not going to do it. Michael Gove has ruled himself out, and it's looking like
an astute political move by Jeremy Hunt.
Yes,
that is some good political game.
I think we all know he just wants to say a chancellor. I think that's kind of that's clearly his game. So that effectively, it seems, based on sort of the first few hours, and we should emphasize we're recording this at 8:05, I think it is. So in case this changes, I apologise.
By the time that we release this onto YouTube at midnight, it'll all have changed.
So Graham Brady will already have 300 nominations and he'll have won. Yeah.
The Prime Minister again, and we'll be like, oh, for God's sake.
Yeah. So there's broadly three sort of leading candidates. The first, as we talked about on Wednesday, is Boris Johnson, and I believe the latest I saw was he already has 33 actually nominations. Though I suspect, he is currently leading in terms of the number of people who've come out from the last time I looked. But it should be pointed that he will obviously have the most passionate and arguably the most sort of radical supporters. So like the likes of Nadine Dorries, who have already been tweeting they supported him before.
People have been banging on about Boris since he blinked left.
So I'm not going to get too scared just yet, though I am slightly worried. So Boris Johnson. The second is Rishi Sunak, who in the last leadership election over the summer was the most popular candidate with the MPs. He went into the final two against Liz Truss. Obviously, he lost, and hence why we're here.
We went to hell in a handbasket, and now we're back. Yeah. So good.
so he's hopefully, obviously, because he gained support of over 100 MPs the first time. There's kind of an expectation, though don't take anything for granted, that he'll get it again.
He's the bookie's favourite, isn't he?
Yes, that's important to emphasise. He's the bookie's favourite. And sort of in the bookie sandwich, so Johnson's currently third favourite, Rishi Sunak's first. In second is Penny Mordaunt, who is the current leader of the House. She was actually, I think at one point earlier in the summer, she was the favourite. And there was lots of polls showing she was very popular with the members. There was lots of polls showing that she, against Keir Starmer would be the most popular leader sort of in the public. So it was, lots of people were saying she was definitely going to win.
And we did say in our podcast the other day that she didn't perform as badly as she could have when she had to stand up and do the urgent question again.
Yes, with the exception of saying that Liz Truss was
the stupid comment.
The more I think about that, the more I think that might have been intentional to undermine her, but that might just be being overly cynical and Machiavellian.
Political. This is just us two as very old now political cynics.
Yeah, so I think so. Yeah, so Penny Mordaunt is the third of these three, and really, I guess at this point we just have to watch the space, right? Because I have absolutely no idea how many each of these people is going to get. There's always the possibility that a fourth person, a sort of Suella Braverman, or I don't even know who else.
Well, anyone. She's apparently lining up for a leadership. They reckon that's why she quit. Is because she was lining up for a leadership challenge.
I suspect what might happen is she might look for the numbers quite early on, and then realize she hasn't got them, and then maybe go behind someone. I think Michael Gove. There's another one who might go behind. I think will go behind someone quite quickly. I think it's all quite interesting, but I guess we just have to watch the space, right?
What do you think of the rumor that's flying around that because everything that we find out about politics now is rumors on Twitter, and then all of a sudden it happens. But what do you think of the rumor that Mordaunt and Sunak could form an alliance to take on Johnson?
I saw that, and I think that's going to be one of those things that I think if they quickly realise Johnson's getting over 100, and particularly if Penny Mordaunt, maybe I suspect she would be the one who would struggle to get to that number. she might then realise. I think it would take one of them to realise the game was up, because both of them very clearly want to be prime minister. I mean, Penny Mordaunt released her sort of PM for PM poster, I think, about an hour after Liz Truss had resigned. She very clearly had that ready.
Rock, man, like it was there.
Well, actually, but this is a common theme, because I think she was the first to come out the blocks as well when Boris Johnson resigned. So she's clearly got someone, a PM for PM campaign leader who's just always ready to go, just in case.
She's like an intern sat in a corner, and then she's like, "It's you!" Like.
Yeah. So I think that's definitely something which we could see happen sort of later in the weekend, if it's very clear one of the candidates suddenly realizes, oh, it's the game is up. And I think, so I just don't. It's really hard at the moment to sort of predict what's going to happen. And I guess all we can talk about is also, I guess the important question is, of the three, who do you think would be the best prime minister? Who do you think would be the biggest threat to the Labour Party? And who do you think would be the biggest gift to the Labour Party? And I'll then answer with the Lib Dems in mind.
Sunak, Johnson. If he became prime minister, Sunak is a very competent person. As much as he was a very divisive chancellor, when he was doing the stuff with the meals during COVID, what was it called?
Eat Out to Help Out.
Eat Out to Help Out. That was an incredibly successful scheme, and as much as we all like to take the rip out of it with the Nando's thing that he did, it was very successful.
I think it was Wagamama's.
Yeah, Wagamama's as well. Yeah, where it was very good. Where they did the DWP. Yeah, I know. Anyway, right. So that was good, and he is quite a good politician. I will say that he can get his facts right. There's no flies on him. He isn't stupid. Again, that's why I think he'd be the biggest threat to the Labour Party. I think that it would be difficult for us to sort of pin him down on something, because he did resign against Boris Johnson and kick it all out, and he didn't come back under Truss. So he's got that on his record, which would be hard for us to taint. Boris Johnson would be the biggest gift, because Boris Johnson is the biggest liar known to man. He was kicked out for an absolutely disgusting thing that he did, which everybody seems to have all of a sudden forgotten about. And I think he'd be the biggest gift to Keir Starmer, because he was the biggest gift to Keir Starmer first time round, and we took him down once, so it'll be even better. This time it'll be just for pleasure. What do you think for the Liberal Democrats?
So I think the best prime minister for the country of the three, I think, would be Rishi Sunak. Partly because, in fairness to Rishi Sunak, everything he said over the summer has been proven right regarding he was proven right, in fairness to him, for all his issues. I think who would be the biggest gift? I think particularly for the Lib Dems, given how we won those by-elections in places like Cheshire and now Shropshire while Boris Johnson was prime minister, and it was very clear that the Blue Wall clearly doesn't like Boris Johnson, particularly those traditional sort of the Surreys, the Berkshires, that sort of areas. I think he would be the biggest gift. In terms of who would be the biggest threat, I'm going to disagree with you. I actually think there's something about Penny Mordaunt that scares me, and I don't know if it's because of the polling, which over the summer which showed that she was the most popular in the public of the candidates. I don't know if it's because she's younger, got lots of energy. She comes across, she always comes across quite well. I think when she does sort of speeches, she's economically more centrist as well, and she does. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
No, I can definitely see where you're coming from. I just don't think that the party are going to go for her, because even though she has been all right as leader of the House for 45 days, she hasn't really had that much ministerial experience compared to the others. Really, would be my only argument, really. But I can see I think she would be a formidable opponent to Keir Starmer over the dispatch box. I really do. I think it's a joke to the Conservative Party. And I wanted to say I've got friends that are organisers for all of the major political parties in the UK, and we've all got a group chat of some description. And I can say for every political party that I know, everybody's saying, God, I hope they elect Boris Johnson. From our perspective, because it's done. It will be done. The Tory party will be decimated. They'll have done it.
I also think it wouldn't be toxic just. Well, I think it would also. First of all, it would damage the Tories electorally, externally. I also think there would be a huge internal division. I think, speaking to Tories and hearing some of the rumours that some Tory MPs have already said they will resign and call by-elections if Boris is elected. Boris Johnson, I should say. I really shouldn't call him Boris. I hate doing that.
I know.
That's one of my bugbears. I
did it as well.
So much. I sometimes accidentally do it. Yeah, it's Johnson. It's not Boris Johnson. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I think I suspect there would be a huge division within the Conservative Party. You would have numerous MPs who would resign. I think you'd have lots of more centrists either just sort of give the game up or really not campaign particularly hard. Particularly, obviously, this goes without saying as well, right? You need, if you're going to be in a situation where MPs resign and you have by-elections, of course, you then need the membership behind you to campaign in these by-elections. And I suspect if sort of, just under half the Tory membership downs tools and sort of gives, says, oh, yeah, we're done because of Boris, we don't like Boris as a leader, that gives the Lib Dems and the Labour Party in these by-elections, particularly the Lib Dems who are the by-election kings, particularly in the last sort of couple of years, it would give them a huge advantage. And, you could easily see the Tories losing sort of 5 to 10 seats, I think.
Absolutely.
By-elections.
I agree with you. And also as well, you've got to look at it from the perspective of, could we see people crossing the floor? Because I said the only thing that we're missing from the 97 election campaign now as Labour Party members is people crossing the floor. And it's incredibly damning when that happens. And obviously, just for our international listeners, when you cross the floor, we have a thing in the UK where you basically, as an MP, can decide to rescind your membership of the Conservative Party and join the Labour benches and sit with the Labour Party.
Or other parties as well.
Yeah, or other parties.
Yeah.
But it's typically the Labour Party when they do that.
Well, actually, you say that. I remember. Do you not remember
the Liberals as well?
Well, I was during the Brexit commotion. There was so many who went from both Labour and the Tories to the
Democrats.
So that was quite
and also to that new party that they set up.
Oh, the Change. Oh, yeah, Change UK, which has become a sort of weird.
Chucker's party.
No,
whatever happened?
It wasn't Chucker's party.
No one will know.
He then gave up on it and joined the Lib Dems anyway. So it just shows, it was kind of like, actually, I'll tell you what Change UK was. This is a very big tangent. You know how in the noughties there was lots of really, really bad remakes of sort of 80s and 70s slasher films. So you had, a terrible remake of Friday the 13th, a terrible remake of Halloween, a terrible remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. Change UK was the terrible remake of the SDP. It was the awful remake, the noughties remake of the SDP that just, was sort of looked the same, but was just nowhere near as good and just didn't work at all. That's what that was. So anyway.
But it's called crossing the floor because you literally stand up off of one bench and you cross over the floor and go and sit on the opposition benches.
And you always get the sort of the few Tories going, but it's always quite theatrical. So you'll get, the opposition benches will clap and roar, and then you get some Tories, you'll always hear them go, "Oh no, don't do that." But kind of, it's almost in a sort of defeatist way. It's not particularly passionate. It's kind of like, "Oh no, don't go."
The order of the day papers.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
so that's the only thing that we're missing now, and I think that if Boris Johnson, don't call him Boris. If Boris Johnson was the leader of the Conservative Party, we'll have by-elections, we'll have people crossing the floor. And I think that would be the most astute move for the Tories up north, would be to cross the floor. Because it would be the only way
Wakefield who did that.
The only way the only way that they would be able to keep their seat is by doing that. And obviously, famously in 97, Lord Howarth, who is from Norwich, we had the meeting with him over Brexit. He crossed the floor from Tories to Labour in 97, and was one of the architects of Sure Start for the Labour Party in the 97 government. So, it can be done, and these people can make fantastic contributions to the next government. So I think that if Boris Johnson's elected as the next leader, the Tories are playing with fire. Really,
my final point, because I think we've talked about what we need to talk about. I think my final point as well would be, if Johnson did get elected, I suspect it would create a risk for the Tories that we could see much more rapidly see a general election. So essentially, for a general election to be called, you would either have to have the government itself do it, which I don't think it will, because if you see in the polls, that would just be ridiculously suicidal. It would, so effectively, to get a general election, you would require the Labour Party, or if you want to say any opposition party could do this, to hold what's called a vote of no confidence. And it would then require sort of about 40, 50, about 40, 50 Conservative to vote effectively that they have no confidence in the government. And even, I think, while it wouldn't be a guarantee, I think if Johnson became leader of the Conservative Party, that would significantly increase the risk of that happening. So, yeah.
And I would like to point out as well that even if you survive the vote of no confidence, it can still be the death toll for your government. James Callaghan is the best example of this. He survived the vote of no confidence by 1 vote, but he still had to call a general election because that's not really a mandate, is it? 1 person.
Yeah, so I think, unless you have anything to add, I think that's a good place to stop. I think we've very well summarized sort of the madness, the chaos that's sort of I think as much as we laugh and joke, I think it's almost kind of from a position of desperation, because it is deeply sad, the situation we're in. And obviously it goes without saying, you can shout off if you disagree, Katie, but I'm so desperate for a general election. It's something that Ed Davey's calling for, the Labour Party's calling for, Nicola Sturgeon has said there should be a general election. I think it feels like we've reached a natural point where the Conservative Party feels finished as the party of government, and we're in desperate need for something new. And I think that's just that feeling is quite across the country. The polls show a majority of people want general elections now. I don't think it will happen for the point that we've just raised, that the polling is so bad for the Conservatives. As I said, the poll today that came out showed the Conservatives would effectively be wiped out, with the exception of 1 seat. I don't actually know. I need to look where that seat was, actually, because that must be the most safe Conservative seat of all time. I don't know. It must be really bizarre. It must be somewhere on the south coast that just has a population 100% of over 60s or something. But yeah. So I think that, unless you have anything to add, Katie, I think that's a good place to stop.
Yeah, just general election now, please. It's time for some grown-ups to get some power.
Absolutely. Can we please get the grown-ups back in charge? Yeah. So thank you so much for watching. Apologies for our sort of slightly negative drunken tone. I think it's just the situation summed up pretty well, isn't it?
Back on Wednesday with normal programming resumed, where we have a guest joining us.
Yes, we're hoping to have a member of the Conservative Party on, but we'll have to
and a member of the Liberal Democrat Party as well. You've got another
second one. Yeah, that'll be good. So we're gonna have starting to. I'm particularly interested. I think, well, in theory, we might have a new PM by then, in theory, but we might not. We might be going through the sort of weird week-long. I mean, that's a quick important question. Will there be hustings in this week? Will there be debates? Well, I guess Sky or BBC or someone could put together a sort of quick debate, but I'm not sure. To be honest, I don't think the Tories would really want that, because it would just make things worse.
I don't think anybody would want it. It's just prolonging our trauma, really. Isn't
you say that, but you would definitely watch it. I would definitely. We don't watch. We know we don't watch. Okay. So thank you so much for watching. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. And have a good rest of your week.
Take care. Bye.